Hey, what's up everyone? I am Portugal and I'm here today with a new video and I think yeah, it's probably much better, right? I don't know if you could hear the aquarium, but I think it can be turned on off for about like 10-20 minutes as I'm recording this video. So, okay, now that that's done. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about an ant species, or rather three different ant species, which I thought, they're very similar in care, but they do come from different places, so they might interest different kinds of people, and at the same time, they're all easy species for beginners. So I think, in general, people actually know how to care for them, but most people getting into the hobby would like to be more knowledgeable in that, and so this video will be interesting for those people. So I think it's a good thing, isn't it? It's probably good. So the species we're going to be talking about is Lasius Niger primarily, and we'll be comparing and setting apart the differences so that you know also how to care for Lasius Flavus and the Lasius Neoniger. Okay? So first of all, I think Niger is not said like that, but it's said in such a way that YouTube voice recognition system will tell YouTube that I'm a bad person, and I don't want to be a bad person on YouTube, so therefore I'm not saying it correctly and I won't even try, which I mostly do not try at all anyways, so who cares? Alright, so Lasius Niger is from Europe, especially South Europe, though they do deal well with the cold, so they do go rather far up north. They also exist natively in North Africa, alright, so all around the Mediterranean they can be found except for the desert-like areas, because extreme heat and extreme dryness, they do not actually deal so well with that. They're more adapted for the cold part of the seasons. So they exist in North Africa. They're also not native, but can be in fact found in North America, especially the USA, near the state of New York and the states adjacent to that state. So the Lasius counterpart for Niger that actually is native to both the US and Canada is Lasius Neoniger, which we'll also talk about in this video, because even though they are from different regions, the care is almost the same. It's almost identical, so no need to make more than to make like 3 separate videos on this species if half of the information that I'm giving is absolutely just the same thing repeated over and over again. Also, we're going to be talking about Lasius Flavus, which is also from Europe, and it's more so from the north of Europe. They do not exist in North Africa, and they are not commonly found in the south of Europe either. They're more of a cold-loving species, and they do exist rather far up north, though they do best in sort of warmer conditions. So midway in Europe and south a little bit where they do better with the climate, but they can adapt to a colder climate. And as you go north, the competition for the niches that these insects occupy becomes less and less, so it becomes easier and easier to be more relevant in the ecosystem. So therefore this ant species tended to migrate north. Okay, now that that's out of the way, why I'm doing 3 species and what's the main difference between these species, let's get actually into the care of Lasius Niger. Okay, so Lasius Niger, being from where they are, the numbers and of temperature and humidity that I'm going to give you, as always, are not to be precisely contained, because as much as you want to give your ants stability and a normal line of parameters, which is always the best in each little space they are in, you should also give them a gradient between each spaces so they can choose in which condition they want to be in. So to thermo and hydro-regulate our ants, or rather to have them thermo and hydro-regulate themselves for you, watch my video on that on the channel, which will be very, very helpful if you don't know how to do that. So if you do know how to do that, I'll give you the little barriers between which you should keep your ants. So for Lasius Niger, the humidity that you should keep them in is anywhere from 30 to 60%, though they do best and they do prefer humidities between 40 and 50%. I know that's a very shallow goal to attain, but it's also the humidity that most people have inside of their homes. So having that, the only thing you have to do is keep the nest just slightly more moist than the outworld, and they'll do just fine. They're not very picky, so if you cannot sustain this 40 to 50, they will do thrive in almost the same conditions, but they do prefer that, and since that is a very achievable humidity goal, you should probably do that. Don't go changing your humidity in a room or do a lot of crazy things to make sure they have a different humidity from what you have if what you have is exactly what they need. Okay? Now, when it comes to temperature, Lasius Niger can handle anything between 18 degrees centigrade Celsius and 32 degrees Celsius without hibernating, because they do hibernate, and I'll get into that in a little bit. They do prefer, however, anywhere from 21 to 24. They don't deal well with much colder temperatures, much warmer temperatures, if you want them to be thriving. But they will develop healthily until you reach the 32 degrees mark. So if you have fluctuations over the years, and of course if you live in a place where it doesn't fluctuate a lot more than this, and if it does for the colder size, which is probably the thing that will happen the most, is it gets a lot lower than 18 degrees Celsius, you can probably hibernate them, and I'll get on that in a little bit. First of all, let me just talk about the other two species, because here we have a difference. So first of all, Lasius Flavus, being from colder European climates, they will be able to handle more humidity, especially because of one fact, which is that they live and they spend a lot more time than other ants inside the soil, which is more damp. So they will be able to handle a lot more humidity than Lasius Niger, and they'll also require a little bit more to thrive, but it's not really relevant in that thriving threshold. On the other hand, Lasius Neoniger can... Okay, so I ran out of editing. And yeah, it's the first time this has happened to me, but I was talking about the differences in temperature required for Lasius Neoniger. So Lasius Neoniger can handle a wide variety of temperatures, and they exist all throughout the north of the US and Canada. And they can handle anything from 18 all the way up to 35 degrees Celsius. And they do still thrive in the same threshold, though they will technically thrive anywhere from 21 to 28. And they do prefer more like 23, 24 than the 25, 26, and then on to the warmer side. They do prefer that it's a little bit colder. And even though the brood production will not be technically faster, they'll produce a lot more adults by batch, and they'll lay a lot more eggs, and that is sort of due to where they are thriving. Okay, so the amount of time it takes to develop from egg to adult worker is not the only thing that is affected by temperature and humidity, and it's not the only thing you should be worried about. If you actually worry about all that sort of little detail, you should be worrying about the amount of eggs your queen lays in each batch, and also, of course, how much time it takes for a worker to develop from an egg to a worker. Okay, so they are a little bit different in this regard. What they are not different in is hibernation. If you do not know how to hibernate your ants, I have a video on that on the channel as well. And in this case of these three ant species, they all hibernate at the same time. They're all Lasius from the northern hemisphere, which means that they hibernate roughly at the same time, which technically is from October from October to March. Now, here's the thing, okay? So, Lasius is a species that exists in a wide range of countries and regions, which means that they go very far up north and very far down south. And that will influence when they get into hibernation, because they do not know it's October. No, they don't have a calendar. They have something that biologists call a bioclock, which sort of tells them it's kind of time to hibernate. But if conditions aren't proper to hibernate, sometimes they literally cannot hibernate, which is what you can make happen in your ant room if you want. If you want to have that happen, you can have them not hibernating. And I will say that Lasius is a species that is known to live for a very long time. I think a queen of Lasius was recorded to living 30 years or something. I think that was a Lasius queen. And that being said, the little amount of queen lifetime you get from letting them rest is something that it doesn't weigh as much in the balance, because they will live a long time, and the possibility that they will die of unforeseen causes before the queen dies of old age is very, very big, because it's very easy to destabilize a colony, especially outside of an ant room, okay? So you do what you want. What I will say is Lasius niger is a species that I personally wouldn't even consider hibernating. Lasius niger and all the other two, and all Lasius in general, I wouldn't really consider hibernating them. I'll just let them do their thing, because even though they have technically a big hibernation period, which is normally a factor that will tell you you should hibernate this ant, they also have one of the longest lifespans for queens in all ants. So, for me personally, I wouldn't hibernate them, but you can, and if you want to, you should do that in the months that they are accustomed to being hibernated, so that their bioclocks are right. And you should also do that following the steps and processes that I actually talk about in that hibernation video, okay? Now let's move on to something different. Now let's move on to sizes, which do not really variate a lot. So the thing is that you'll notice in this video is that Lasius niger and Lasius neoniger, as the name suggests, are pretty much the same except from different regions. And they truly are. And Lasius flavus is something that is usually sold or told to be very, very similar to Lasius niger, but yellow, which I found very interesting to have, like, basically the same thing but in yellow and being different species. And I didn't really buy it, and I was right. They are not the same thing at all. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're still Lasius and they're still very similar, and care is actually very, very close to that, but in the wild they are wildly different. They are absolutely completely different ant species, and they have very different behaviors. In captivity, they're kind of close, and I'll get to that when we get to food, because that's where the big difference comes into play in food and behavior. So, sizes don't change a lot. The queen is usually a lot bigger than the workers in Lasius, and the queen is usually around 9 millimeters to about a centimeter, but 9 millimeters is more correct to be said. The queen of Lasius flavus is usually a little bit smaller, and I've always almost seen it be marked as 8 millimeters, but it's almost the same thing, if not the same thing in sizes. The workers, however, you'll notice that there is a little bit of difference in worker sizes, because you have very small workers of about 3 millimeters, which is not all that small. They're not like escape everything small, but they are still small, and if you want to watch them properly, you should probably use a little I always forget the name to that. You should use a little, I'll get it, magnifying glass. You should always use a little magnifying glass or something, like 2 times, 3 times. It's enough to watch them properly. They can get up to 5 millimeters, which isn't a lot, but it is a little cool difference in worker sizes. Neoniger is exactly the same sizes as Niger, and just like the queens, Lasius Flavus is a little bit smaller. The smallest workers of Lasius Flavus are the same size, 3 millimeters, as the smallest workers of Lasius Niger. However, the biggest workers of Lasius Flavus will be around 4 millimeters. They do not have as much of a difference between worker sizes. It's almost the same thing. Anywhere from 3 to 4, you will barely be able to tell the difference, but you will be able to anyways. And you will be able to tell the difference in Lasius Niger and Lasius Neoniger, but it's not something really relevant. You wouldn't call them polymorphic in any way whatsoever. It's just a little difference in worker sizes, which is kinda cool, I guess. And the nanitics tend to be a little bit smaller. Sometimes the nanitics are even smaller than 3 millimeters, but not in Lasius Flavus. And I'll get to that at the end, because it's probably the last thing that is in order. Okay, so now food. In the ant room, in a human's care, all three of these species will be exactly the same when it comes to food. The fact that some of them seem a little bit more interested in sweets or protein will depend in the stage of life that their brood and queen are at, and will also depend from colony to colony. It does happen with every ant species that each colony has a different sort of personality in little ways that an ant keeper will notice. And it also happens that as the stages of brood production, especially in the beginning, happen, the colony will look for specific sources of food, sweets, proteins, and whatever. Especially, for example, when a colony has a lot of mages, like for example my Sunempire is now in that stage, they have a lot of mages inside the nest that are ready to protect the queen, and they usually didn't touch honey at all, but lately they've been eating honey like crazy, because the super mages, they do not require a lot of protein like brood does to develop. They are already developed, and so their protein intake is very low. However, to just be alive as such a big ant, and for all the other workers to be coming out constantly, they do need a lot of energy, and so they are actively seeking more and more sweets as they develop bigger and bigger workers, and they develop a personality that is more towards puts a lot of workers outside to get a lot of food to boost their colony. Okay, so it does happen, as I've explained, with the colony's personality and the colony's stage of life. So what you want to feed them is basic sweets, so honey, sugar, honey water, whatever you want, and protein jelly. That sweet stuff that is also sold for reptiles and ants. That also has some protein, protein. Yeah, it also has some protein, but should not be a basis. However, this type of species also eats fruits, which is a great source of sweets for your ants. They do not eat fruits as well as some bigger ants because they cannot dig into them, especially tougher fruits like an apple. Lasius will probably not be able to dig into the apple, so they won't be able to take as much from it as other ant colonies, but I mean, they do not eat a lot. They're very small ants, so it's a cool thing to give them is also fruits, because it's a different kind of sugar, and variety is very, very important in ant keeping and ant colonies, because in the wild they're accustomed and they have developed to be able and to take advantage of being able to get a lot of different sources of food, and in captivity you should give them that availability and that variety, because it's really beneficial to them. So Lasius Niger, Lasius Flavus, and Lasius Neoniger are very good forks. They're not picky eaters at all. So here's the difference in behavior. In the setup of a normal one queen, because they are all monogenous, you'll have almost the same behavior. I have found in my own experience, though it's not with any scientific basis, that Lasius Niger is more daring and more exploring than Lasius Flavus, and that actually makes sense when you check the behavior and food intake of these colonies in the wild. Okay, so Lasius Niger and Lasius Neoniger are a normal, quote-unquote, normal ant species. They live underground, they forage outside, and they forage for everything they can find. They do have relationships with ant cows, which are aphids that produce honeydew due to drinking up the sap of trees. And if you can give them honeydew in some sort of way, which will mostly involve planting their setup, which has its own beneficial things and not so beneficial things, but they do especially well on aphids that feed on roses, which is something that is very easy to come by, the roses themselves, not the aphids so much. But if you find a rose in nature or even in an urban area, you will probably be able to find aphids on that rose and transfer those aphids or some of those aphids to the rose you have at home. So you can do that. I wouldn't. It's a lot of work for an intake of food that you can go past. You can give them honey, sugar, water, and all those kind of stuff that will absolutely negate the need for honeydew. However, they do have a lot of tendency to do that, to engage in that mutualistic relationship with aphids, okay? And Lasius Niger and Lasius Neoniger, I like this. And however, Lasius Flavus, which this is something that most people probably do not know, Lasius Flavus is almost fully subterranean, okay? They live, and if you actually see a worker of Lasius Niger and Lasius Flavus up close, you'll notice that the Lasius Flavus worker's eye is like 100 times smaller than the Lasius Niger's worker's eye. So actually, in fact, Lasius Flavus almost does not sense or see you moving around in their setup. They will obviously differentiate when light is on or off, but they will not at all see your tweezers in front of the worker, right? Unless it can sense them with their antennae or actually touch the tweezers, they'll not be able to tell they're there. And almost every ant species of their size can and will see the tweezers if they're like paying attention, because ants do not see very well, most of them. So they are completely subterranean. They almost live their entire lives underground. They eat primarily off of a mutualistic relationship with root aphids, which will make it so that if you put Lasius Niger in a naturalistic setup and you happen to have root aphids, you'll never see them again, because they will not come out unless they have to. If they are finding enough soil-dwelling creatures for them to eat some protein, or if they have enough aphids to cull some of them for their meat, they'll not need to come out, which is honestly a great strategy evolutionary-wise, but for an ant keeper, that's not exactly what you want to have your ants doing. So what you can do is keep them in a man-made setup, and they will work and live just like Lasius Niger. And that is very cool, because they are very cool ants to watch. They have very cool behaviors. All of them have. They're very... Even if you have a big colony, the individual workers of an ant species usually grow more confidence as they have a bigger colony to back them up. But Lasius tends to be always the same, like pussyfooting around that a nanatic will do. They'll be like very scared of anything unless they find it safe or that they have enough numbers to attack it in the spot. So it's very cool and interesting ant species to watch. They're not that small, then they'll not escape. They're not great climbers, and you can do a lot of cool setups with them because they'll not mess up almost anything. And they're very cool, to be honest. I like them a lot.
And I think I'll do an ant species, a little setups with them in the near future. One thing I wanted to do, since I found out that Lasius Flavus lives primarily underground and eats off root aphids is that I wanted to sort of have a setup where there's no dirt so that I can see them, right? But there is some plants growing, and that there can be aphids in the roots, but I don't want the roots to be in any kind of substrate. So what I was thinking was growing out some pothos, or something that is like a quick growing species, and have the roots of that pothos just go through plaster, that quick hardening plaster, and have, sort of these tubes coming out. But I wouldn't know how to actually go about creating that. I know that technically if I could do it, it would work. I do not know how to do it, but I'll try some stuff, and I'll see if I can do anything, because it would be very cool to watch that behavior of Lasius Flavus moving around the aphids and taking care of root aphids, because it's something that science has not been able to sort of put to record and actually watch happen, because to watch that you have to intrusively go into their nest, and then they'll stop doing it, they'll go into panic mode. And if you have the luck to have some created up against the glass in an enclosure, it's a little bit, because of all the dirt, the image will not ever be good enough. And I think that if I could do such thing, it would be absolutely amazing, and I will try my best.
So, if you've watched this whole rant about how Lasius Flavus is actually different, but anyways you can keep them as if they were very close to Lasius Niger, I really hope that you like what I do, because apparently you can hear me talking for ages, and I will ask you to subscribe, like, and share the video if you want. By the way, here's a note on Lasius Flavus. Lasius Flavus, they do something which has a name, and I've written it down somewhere in my school notes. Paleometrosis. Yeah, that's the thing. I found it while doing some research, and I just had these papers at hand, so I just wrote down. Paleometrosis is a phenomena that happens in usually insects, some species of them, where you'll have a few queens get together, raise up a colony, alright, and therefore having more brood at the start and more workers at the start. What will happen then is that the workers will all become from a single colony, and in a few weeks or months, which is a word I hate saying it, I cannot say month in the plural. So in a few weeks or month in the plural is also in a few weeks time, and maybe a lot of weeks time, you'll have the workers either kick out the other queens to have a single one which is dominant and lays more eggs, or just flat out killing the other queens. Sometimes they do it in one swift purge, where they either kick or kill every one of the queens, and sometimes you have it as a slow process, like they kick one out, kick the other, and until they have a single one, okay? It's a phenomenon that science doesn't understand fully why they do that and don't keep the queen until the end. And it's also not, they also are not sure why they start that way, because usually they're not related, the queens. So it's not like the pheromones are too similar and the workers get confused and that they can like shortcut their monogeneity like that. So what I mean by this is that in the wild it happens a lot, and it's a very cool thing to know. And also in captivity, if you put some queens together, they might start a colony together, and you might even see them being sold as polygynous colonies with more than one queen, and do not trust that. Okay, do not. It's not polygynous. I mean, if you want to buy that like that for the sake of having a boost to your colony by having more workers produced at the beginning, sure. But keep in mind and know that that is the only reason they have more queens. They'll all die because in the setup they cannot get away, alright? So they'll be excluded to the outworld, and given the fact that they are not living because they can't, they'll die. Okay? That's all. And I hope this helps everyone of you who are interested in getting into the hobby, especially because most of these species are beginner friendly. And I will also say that if any of you are looking for sort of an enlightenment in how these species work, and you are already an experienced ant keeper, here you have it. I mean, this is a lot of information that I could find, and I have compiled and then just cross-checked everything. So it's what I do in these videos, and I hope you've liked it. So till the next one.